School's closed. What are you doing here?
I'm conducting an official district inspection. This is my property.
Don't lie to me. You're trespassing. Put the tablet down.
I am the superintendent of this district. You are out of line.
Turn around now! You are being detained.
You're making...
The high-definition security camera in the lobby of the Sterling Tower captured the entire incident in 4K resolution, recording every micro-expression, every gesture, and every fatal assumption. Officer Kyle Ricker, moonlighting as private security for the building's management firm, had absolutely no idea that the woman he was blocking from the elevator bank was not a lost delivery driver, nor a confused tourist. He didn't know that Dr. Elena Vance had spent 30 years as a neurosurgeon holding the lives of senators and CEOs in her steady hands before retiring to manage her investment portfolio. He certainly didn't know that 72 hours ago, the Sterling Tower had effectively become the Vance Tower following a complex acquisition deal that gave her majority ownership of the 40-story high-rise. At 58 years old, Elena Vance was wearing comfortable walking shoes, dark denim jeans, and a beige cashmere cardigan. She wasn't flashy, she wasn't loud. She was simply the owner of the building, and she was about to be handcuffed in her own lobby for the crime of trying to go to her office. Before we unravel this infuriating chain of events, I need you to do something important. Go to the comments section right now and tell me where you are watching from, your city, your state, your country. And if you believe that ownership shouldn't require an explanation based on appearance, hit that subscribe button. You are not going to believe how this officer tries to justify his actions. Elena walked through the revolving glass doors of the Sterling Tower at 10:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. The morning rush had subsided, leaving the polished marble lobby echoing with the quiet hum of commerce. She loved this building. She loved the Art Deco details on the ceiling and the way the light hit the brass fixtures. She had just closed the deal on Friday, a transaction worth north of $80 million, and today was her first walkthrough as the proprietor. She wasn't here to fire anyone. She was here to plan renovations. She held a tablet in one hand and a specialized digital access card in the other. She walked with the confidence of a woman who had spent decades commanding operating theaters. She bypassed the visitor's desk because owners don't need to sign in and headed straight for the private executive turnstiles that led to the high-speed elevators. That was when Officer Kyle Ricker stepped out from behind the security podium. Ricker was 29 years old with a military-style haircut and a posture that screamed he was looking for a reason to assert authority. He was an active-duty city police officer working a sanctioned off-duty detail to make extra cash. He saw a black woman in casual clothes bypassing the check-in desk, and his mind immediately categorized her. In his mind, she didn't fit the profile of the tenants who paid $5,000 a month for office space. She looked like the help or perhaps a delivery courier who was lost. "Excuse me, ma'am." Ricker's voice boomed across the lobby. It wasn't a polite inquiry. It was a command. "The service entrance is around back on 4th Street. Elena paused and turned. She didn't look startled. She adjusted her glasses and looked at the young man with a mix of confusion and patience. "I'm not making a delivery, officer. I'm going up to the penthouse suites." Ricker stepped out from behind the podium, moving to physically intercept her path to the turnstiles. He placed a hand on his belt right near his radio. "Deliveries contractors and custodial staff have to use the freight elevator. Building policy. You need to turn around and exit the building." "I am not custodial staff," Elena said, her voice calm but firm. She held up her key card. "I have an access pass. I'm heading to my office." Ricker scoffed. It was a short, sharp sound of disbelief. He looked at the expensive tablet in her hand and the card, but he didn't really see them. He saw defiance. "Ma'am, the executive elevators are for tenants and authorized guests only. Now, I'm not going to ask you again. If you have a delivery, take it to the dock. If you're looking for a job application that's online, you can't just walk through here." Elena took a breath. She knew the statistics. She knew that as a black woman in America, her tone was being scrutinized more heavily than her credentials. Officer, my name is Dr. Elena Vance. I am the principal owner of the holding company that acquired this building last week. I am going to scan my card, and I am going to get on that elevator. Ricker's face hardened. He took another step closer, invading her personal space. Look, lady, I don't have time for fairy tales. You're trespassing. I'm telling you to leave the premises immediately, or I will physically remove you. Elena didn't retreat. She stood her ground, feet shoulder-width apart, the same stance she used when correcting a resident during a delicate spinal fusion. I am not trespassing on property I own. If you are the security detail, you work for the management company, which means indirectly you work for me. I suggest you look at this access card before you make a career-ending mistake. I don't need to look at your fake card, Ricker snapped. You're creating a disturbance. You're being disorderly. I am standing still, Elena countered, her voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. You are the one raising your voice. You are the one creating a spectacle. I am simply trying to access my property. Ricker reached for his radio. Dispatch, show me out with a disorderly female at 400 Main Sterling Tower lobby, refusing to leave, causing a scene. I didn't refuse to leave, Elena corrected him, speaking clearly enough for the few people in the lobby to hear. I refuse to be ejected from my own building. There is a difference. Ma'am, put your hands where I can see them. Ricker shouted, escalating the situation instantly. Elena's hands were already visible. She was holding a tablet and a pass. She didn't drop them. She just looked at him with profound disappointment. My hands are visible, officer, and you are making a grave error. The lobby was no longer quiet. The confrontation had drawn the attention of several people waiting for the elevators, men in gray suits, women in blazers clutching coffees and briefcases. They stopped scrolling on their phones and looked up. To them, the visual was confusing. A well-dressed older woman was speaking calmly while a uniformed officer was shouting and posturing aggressively. One man, a tax attorney named Davidson who rented on the 12th floor, frowned. He recognized the look of a person who belonged, and Elena Vance had that look. But nobody intervened. They just watched. The bystander effect took hold, paralyzed by the badge on Ricker's chest. Ricker felt the eyes on him. He felt his authority being challenged in a public forum. In his mind, backing down now would be a sign of weakness. He had given an order leave, and she had disobeyed. That was the infraction. The facts of ownership were secondary to the fact of compliance. He moved to block the turnstile completely, his body acting as a human barricade. Last warning, Ricker snarled, his face flushing red. Step away from the turnstile and exit the building, or you will be placed under arrest for criminal trespass and disorderly conduct. Elena looked at the turnstile, then back at Ricker. She made a calculation. She could leave, call her property manager, call the police chief, and sort this out over the phone. But that would validate his assumption that she didn't have the right to be there. It would accept the premise that a black woman needed a chaperone or a phone call to enter a space she owned. She decided right then and there that she would not leave. She would document. I am staying right here, Elena said. I have identified myself. I have offered proof of my right to be here. You have refused to examine it. If you arrest me, you are arresting the landlord of this building for standing in her own lobby. Are you prepared for the liability that comes with that? Turn around, Ricker barked, ignoring her question entirely. Hands behind your back. I am not resisting, Elena said, her voice projecting to the witnesses. I am complying with your physical directions under duress, but I am stating for the record that I own this property. Ricker grabbed her arm. He didn't ask her to turn. He spun her. The tablet slipped from her hand and clattered onto the marble floor. The screen shattered a distinct crack that echoed through the cavernous space. Elena didn't flinch. She didn't look at the broken device. She kept her eyes forward, her chin up. That tablet contained the architectural schematics for this building, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. Add that to the damages. Stop talking, Ricker commanded. He pulled his handcuffs from his belt. The metal rattled ominously. Just then, the automatic doors slid open, and 2 more uniformed officers rushed in. They were the backup Ricker had called. They saw a fellow officer struggling with a suspect, or what looked like a struggle because Ricker was being rough, even though Elena was standing perfectly still. They didn't assess. They didn't ask questions. They saw blue, and they supported blue. "Grab her other arm," Ricker shouted to the incoming officers. "She's non-compliant." One of the new officers, a younger man named Miller, grabbed Elena's left wrist. They wrenched her arms behind her back. Elena winced as the rotator cuff in her right shoulder, an old tennis injury, was stretched beyond its limit. "I am not resisting," she repeated, gritting her teeth against the pain. "Check my pocket. The access card is in my pocket." "We'll check everything downtown," Ricker said, snapping the cuffs tight. Too tight. The metal bit into the soft skin of her wrists. Elena looked over Ricker's shoulder and saw the horrified face of the building's concierge, a young woman named Sarah, who had just returned from a bathroom break. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. She knew who Elena was. She had been briefed on the new ownership just yesterday. "Officer," Sarah squeaked, her voice trembling. "Officer, stop. That's Ms. Vance. She owns the building." Ricker paused for a fraction of a second. He looked at Sarah, then back at Elena. But the cuffs were already on. The scene had been made. To stop now would be to admit a catastrophic error in front of an audience. His ego couldn't take the hit. "She can explain it to the judge," Ricker said, doubling down. "Right now, she's going to the precinct." Have you ever seen someone dig a hole so deep they can't see the sky anymore? That is exactly what Officer Ricker was doing. He grabbed Elena by the elbow and marched her toward the exit. The crowd of businessmen and lawyers parted like the Red Sea, watching in stunned silence as the owner of the Sterling Tower was perp-walked out of her own front door. Elena didn't look down. She looked at every single person she passed. She made eye contact with Davidson, the tax attorney. She made eye contact with the concierge. She wanted them to remember this. As they exited the building, the warm sunlight hit Elena's face. A squad car was waiting at the curb, lights flashing. Ricker pushed her head down, that humiliating gesture they do in movies, and shoved her into the back seat. The plastic seat was hard. The car smelled of sweat and disinfectant. Elena closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She wasn't crying. She was calculating. She was mentally drafting the list of people she would call the moment she had access to a phone. She was visualizing the legal complaint. She was counting the minutes. Ricker got into the driver's seat. He was pumped full of adrenaline, convincing himself he had just secured the perimeter against a dangerous intruder. He had no idea that the intruder in his back seat had the personal cell phone number of the mayor saved in her contacts. The ride to the precinct was short, maybe 10 minutes. Ricker didn't speak. He hummed along to the radio, a nervous tick. Elena sat in silence. When they arrived, Ricker pulled her out and walked her into the processing area. It was busy. Phones were ringing. Officers were typing reports. The air was thick with tension. They approached the booking desk. The desk sergeant, a veteran named Lieutenant O'Malley with gray hair and a tired face, looked up. He saw Ricker, a young hothead he didn't particularly like, dragging in a woman who looked like she belonged at a charity gala, not a holding cell. "What do we have here, Ricker?" O'Malley asked, eyeing Elena's clothes, the cashmere, the expensive shoes. "Criminal trespass, disorderly conduct resisting arrest," Ricker recited, placing Elena's broken tablet and wallet on the counter. "Refused to leave the Sterling Tower lobby. Caused a scene." O'Malley picked up the wallet. He opened it to check for ID. He pulled out her driver's license. Dr. Elena Vance. Address, a multi-million-dollar estate in the breathless hills of the city. He frowned. He dug a little deeper and found a card that wasn't a credit card. It was a platinum-level donor card for the Police Benevolent Association. O'Malley looked up at Elena. "Dr. Vance, you're a doctor." "I'm a retired neurosurgeon," Elena said calmly. "And I am the owner of the building Officer Ricker just removed me from." The room went quiet. It wasn't the silence of a library. It was the silence of a bomb squad watching a timer count down. Ricker rolled his eyes. Yeah, she keeps saying that. She had some fake keycard. It's not fake, Elena said. And my attorney, Mr. Marcus Thorne, should be walking through that door any second. I believe Sarah, the concierge, called him. As if summoned by the gods of dramatic timing, the heavy doors of the precinct swung open. Marcus Thorne did not look like a man you wanted to argue with. He was 6'4", wearing a suit that cost more than Ricker's annual salary, and he was carrying a leather briefcase. He spotted Elena in cuffs, and his face went terrifyingly blank. "Unshackle her," Thorne said. He didn't shout. He didn't ask. He commanded. His voice was like grinding stones. "Who are you?" Ricker stepped forward, puffing his chest out. "I am her attorney," Thorne said, ignoring Ricker and looking directly at Lieutenant O'Malley. "And I am holding the deed of trust for the Sterling Tower, 400 Main Street, which lists Sterling Holdings, LLC as the sole owner. Dr. Elena Vance is the managing partner and sole signatory of that LLC." Thorne slammed a thick stack of papers onto the booking desk. "You have arrested the landlord for entering her own lobby. You have assaulted a 58-year-old woman with no criminal record. You have destroyed her property. And you are currently holding her in handcuffs without probable cause." O'Malley looked at the papers. He looked at the deed. He looked at Ricker, whose face had gone from red to a sickly shade of pale white. "Ricker," O'Malley said, his voice low and dangerous. "Take the cuffs off, now." "But she refused to," Ricker stammered. "Take them off," O'Malley roared, standing up. Ricker fumbled for his keys. His hands were shaking. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by the cold, creeping realization that he had made a mistake of monumental proportions. The metal clicked. The cuffs fell away. Elena rubbed her wrists. There were red welts forming where the metal had dug in. She didn't look at Ricker. She looked at O'Malley. "I want photos taken of my wrists," she said. "For the lawsuit." "Of course, doctor," O'Malley said. "We'll get you some ice. We'll get you water. I cannot apologize enough." "Don't apologize to me, Lieutenant," Elena said, finally turning her gaze to Ricker. The young officer looked like he wanted to vanish into the floor tiles. "Save your apologies for the courtroom, because I'm going to make sure this officer never wears a badge again." The station was in chaos. The captain was called down from his office. The city attorney was on the phone within 20 minutes. They tried to get Elena to sign a release form, a waiver of liability. Thorne literally laughed in their faces. "We aren't signing anything except the complaint," Thorne said. They walked out of the precinct 45 minutes later. Elena held her head high, but inside she was shaking. The adrenaline dump was hitting her. She felt the phantom weight of the cuffs on her wrists. But she also felt a fire burning in her chest. The lawsuit was filed the next morning. It wasn't a simple complaint. It was a 60-page treatise on civil rights violations. It named Officer Kyle Ricker, the police department, and the city. It alleged false imprisonment, assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of the 4th and 14th Amendments. It cited Terry v. Ohio. It cited checkpoints. It cited the fact that Ricker had never once asked for her name before deciding she didn't belong. The initial damages sought were unspecified, but the message was clear. This was going to be expensive. The city's response was typical at first. They circled the wagons. The police union released a statement saying Ricker had acted in good faith to secure a high-value building and that Elena had been uncooperative. They tried to paint her as an elitist who thought she was above the rules, but then the video leaked. Remember that 4K security camera in the lobby? As the owner of the building, Elena owned that footage. Her security team pulled the file before the police even thought to subpoena it. Her legal team released it to the press 3 days after the arrest. The video was devastating. It showed a calm, composed woman standing still. It showed an aggressive, shouting officer invading her space. It showed the clear moment she offered her ID and he refused to look at it. It showed the violence of the arrest. It went viral instantly. Lobby. While Black trended on Twitter X for a week, the view count hit 10 million. Cable news pundits dissected every frame. The audio was crystal clear. "I don't need to look at your fake card." And that line alone destroyed Ricker's defense. The public outcry was deafening. Protesters gathered outside the Sterling Tower, not to protest Elena, but to support her. They gathered outside the police precinct demanding Ricker's badge. Then came the discovery phase. Thorne and his team dug into Ricker's personnel file. They found that this wasn't an isolated incident. In his 6 years on the force, Ricker had 9 citizen complaints for discourtesy and excessive force. All of them involved minority citizens. All of them had been dismissed by internal affairs as unsubstantiated. But there was a pattern. Ricker had a habit of stopping people who he thought didn't belong in certain neighborhoods or vehicles. He was a profiler. He was a lawsuit waiting to happen, and the department had kept him on the street. The city attorney called Thorne. "We want to settle," they said. "We aren't interested in a quiet settlement," Thorne replied. "Dr. Vance wants policy changes. She wants a public admission of wrongdoing, and she wants Ricker gone." The negotiations were tense. The city was terrified of a jury trial. They knew that if a jury saw that video and heard Elena testify, a neurosurgeon, a pillar of the community, a grandmother, they would award her $10 million just out of spite. They had to mitigate the damage. The final settlement was agreed upon 4 months after the incident. The number was $2.1 million. It was one of the largest individual payouts for a wrongful arrest in the city's history. But the money was the least important part of the deal. As part of the settlement, the city agreed to a consent decree requiring mandatory de-escalation training for all officers, specifically focusing on interaction with property owners and private security details. And Officer Kyle Ricker. He was terminated. Not allowed to resign, terminated. The internal investigation, fueled by the pressure of the lawsuit and the viral video, finally found that he had violated multiple department policies, including conduct unbecoming, failure to investigate, and unlawful detention. His certification was revoked. He would never work in law enforcement again. 6 months after the incident, Dr. Elena Vance walked back into the lobby of the Sterling Tower. The renovations were complete. The marble gleamed under the warm lighting. The turnstiles hummed softly. She paused at the spot where she had been handcuffed. She looked at her wrists. The physical scars were gone, but the memory was etched into her psyche. She took a deep breath, adjusting the lapel of her blazer. The new head of security, a respectful man named Mr. Henderson, stood up from the desk. "Good morning, Dr. Vance. The elevators are ready for you." "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," she said softly. She swiped her card. The light turned green. The gate opened. Elena Vance stepped onto the elevator and pressed the button for the 40th floor. As the doors closed, shutting out the noise of the world below, she stood alone in the silence. She had won the lawsuit. She had won the settlement. She had forced the system to bend. But as she watched the floor numbers tick upward, she knew that the victory was bittersweet. She had to buy a skyscraper to prove she had the right to stand in a lobby. She had to be a neurosurgeon to be believed over a patrolman. She had to have a high-powered attorney on speed dial to avoid spending a night in jail. The doors opened on the penthouse floor, revealing a panoramic view of the city skyline, a city full of people who didn't have her resources, who didn't have her title, who faced their own Officer Rickers in the shadows, where there were no 4K cameras. Elena walked to the window and looked down at the streets below. The money from the settlement had already been transferred to a new foundation. She established a legal defense fund for victims of wrongful arrest. It was a start. It was something. Justice is not just about punishing the guilty. It's about restoring the dignity of the innocent. And sometimes that restoration carries a price tag of $2.1 million. What do you think? Was the settlement enough, or should the city have faced a jury trial? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, please share it. We need to keep talking about this until ownership is recognized by the content of our character, not the assumptions of a stranger. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.